to CineMyles, the show for cinephiles. I'm your host, Miles Hughes. I'm joined once again by Mr. Jason Woods, and we are here to discuss, yet again, Batman through the years on film. Today's episode, we're focusing on the Tim Burton years, specifically represented by Batman and Batman Returns. Oh my gosh, they just appeared right there.
You didn't do that?
I didn't do that. I certainly didn't do that in editing. Batman '89 is one of the films, along with Jaws and Star Wars, that's often credited as having started the blockbuster trend.
Yes.
Huge hit when it came out.
It was, and it was hot too. I remember standing in line on the pavement, quite a long line, with people in Joker costumes and Batman capes and cowls.
And even back then, before cosplay was really a thing.
It was amazing. A great energy.
You know, at that point, the only movie version was this one.
That's right, but I think through the merchandising and marketing of the show beforehand, I think people could tell that it was going to be this different interpretation. Perhaps the tone derived from Frank Miller's graphic novel, The Dark Knight Returns.
Right. It's much more in tune with the darkness, with the fear aspect that he tries to encompass.
Yes.
Tim Burton, looking back, almost seems like too obvious of a choice. Batman Returns, I would say, is a more Tim Burton-y film. The black and white spirals everywhere, and everyone's wearing black and leather and eyeliner, and the Tim Burton-isms are very present in that one, whereas the first one feels a bit more restrained.
I agree, and you would think that the first one was probably high risk, and the producers were more involved and saying what you can and cannot do.
Between the two, I think Batman Returns is definitely the stronger film, partially because you can tell the artist was a bit more passionate about making it. He's more interested in the characters he's working with. These two films feature a number of iconic comic book movie performances. Michael Keaton, who I'm sure was the strangest choice ever, and still kind of is. Looking back, he seems to have mainly been cast for the scene where he goes insane and tries to hit Joker with the fire poker.
Yeah.
He pulls it off. He's a very good Bruce Wayne, and he's a mostly good Batman. He's definitely handicapped by the costume for the bulk of his screen time.
Sure.
It's one of those classic doohickeys where he can't turn his neck.
I think somebody had to realize that anybody can wear the cape and the cowl and be Batman in that way. But the Bruce Wayne component, there was some early wisdom there, and Michael Keaton can bring this irony to the role, and maybe even some sardonic elements.
Yeah.
You know, this wry sense of humor. He was charming.
Yes. When at the time he was more known for comedies and such as well.
Yeah, which a movie so dark needs so that you have time to breathe as an audience member.
Exactly. You also get a heaping helping of that from Jack Nicholson's performance as the Joker.
Indeed. One
of the more iconic ones in both comic book history and his own personal filmography, which is no small feat, considering he has one of the most impressive resumes in all of Hollywood. Very big, very broad, very, very scenery-chewing, but it's also kind of menacing and kind of scary. The most terrifying scene in either film is the one where just after he's been burned by the acid and he's in the guy's shop and you can't see his face yet, but he's asking to see the mirror, and then he starts cackling and then he starts like breaking stuff, and it's so creepy and it gets under your skin, and this is before you even get a good look at what he's turned into.
What he is, yeah.
Also one of the only versions of the Joker that tries to give him a backstory. Possibly misguidedly so, especially the whole aspect where apparently he killed Bruce Wayne's parents.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate
don't know how I feel about
confluence of events. Well, I think you're making it pretty clear.
Yeah. Okay, I don't feel good about that, I should say. The hero and the villain are already connected because they already had this major event happen to them 20 years earlier, and now it's all coming back, but under completely different circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's comic book writers and storytellers who know the story, looking for some kind of fresh element to get their interest rejuvenated. Most audience members don't care about it. They say, Batman, I want to see it. Jack Nicholson, I want to see it.
Yeah.
And then, unless it's dreadfully executed, they leave entertained.
Yeah.
Just because of the heavy lifting that I think the character does on his own.
That original film is definitely still entertaining, but perhaps hasn't aged super well. In particular, the plot is nonsense. It's not even nonsense in the sense that it's over the top and ridiculous, but it's just kind of hard to follow. It's not super clear what one plot thread has to do with another, and some of them don't ever get resolved. Kim Basinger kind of wanders absent-mindedly through the film as this reporter that doesn't really accomplish much of anything, but always seems to be there.
I know, it's another unfortunate placement of a female character that, hopefully that'll all get righted here this generation.
One can only hope. The second film has one of my favorites characters in comic book movie history, and that is, of course, Michelle Pfeiffer's turn as Catwoman.
And there we turned a corner.
At the risk of getting lewd, this performance was the thing that made me realize I was attracted to women. Fetishization aside, I do think it's actually a really compelling performance, a really great transformation to see her turn from this mousy secretary to this fully confident dominatrix type. And that she actually makes for a pretty effective foil against Batman, because she can get at him in a place that his other villains might not necessarily be able to reach.
Michelle Pfeiffer is just a wonderful actress, and she announced that in her performance so effortlessly. She made it look easy, which means, of course, it was terribly difficult, and not everyone could do it. And she absolutely, for me, stole the show in that film. And it would not be the same film without her.
Oh, I completely agree.
So.
Which is not to speak little of Danny DeVito's work as the Penguin.
It's true.
It's a very inspired take on the character. That's probably the most Tim Burton aspect of either film. Mutant fish creature, who's also a mob boss, but it's like this sewer-dwelling thing. There's this whole subplot where he's running for mayor, probably the most controversial aspect of the film, especially from a marketing standpoint, because they suddenly found themselves in this situation where they have this really grotesque version of the Penguin that's kind of difficult to market to kids. The action figures that were released when the film came out, the one for the Penguin is actually, I'm pretty sure he looks just like this, rather than actually looking like what he does in the movie, because they didn't feel confident, putting that snarling monster into a kid's Happy Meal, along with a number of accusations that the second film got a lot darker and indulged some of the more perverse aspects of Burton's style a little, to the point where they started to worry about how mainstream it was going to be and how well they could sell toys. And I think a lot of that contributed to Tim Burton ultimately not continuing on.
Well, yes, and then their extreme over-course correction for the two that follow.
Oh yes, which we will get into.
I mean, we're not talking about life-changing cinema here. We're purely speaking about entertainment value. And my assumption would be that anyone watching this has watched it before, and they're either agreeing or no, you're wrong, this was a masterpiece because. But I think they're a bit long, but they're good for entertainment. They're good to share, I think, with other people. What happened with me in the movie theaters, which is different than my experience with the Adam West era, is that was the first Batman experience that I shared with other people. I went to the movies to see it with people. And so I wouldn't sit down to watch those films by myself now, unless I was prepping for something like CineMyles.
Well, it is interesting, if you look back at the history of Batman, these Burton films are kind of right in the middle in pretty much every aspect. They're not the best of the films, but they're certainly not the worst. They're not the darkest of the films, but they're certainly not the brightest. They're kind of just floating around. I don't know that there's any one aspect of them that's the best or worst in any real capacity.
Well, I think from a merchandising standpoint, they made the most money.
A solid representation of the character.
That's right.
Which is very much unlike the next two films that we received, which we will talk about next month. So thank you very much for tuning in and watching our retrospective on Batman on film. Thank you for joining me, Jason.
And always a pleasure.
And we will catch you all on the flip side. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, do all those fun things. Have a good night.